Timothy Modu. Like many, I started my life as a investment banking, currency trader with Shesin Brothers in the 80s. Moved into insurance, studied accounting, and then decided to spend most of the time in management. But along the line, I moved from the financial world into insurance shortly, a brief stay in insurance. Then I found love. I really found love in redevelopment of communities. So I got involved in regeneration. And so the story of Stratford, as people know it today, could not have been told without 7 of us who were the board member in transformation of Stratford, including the bidding of the Olympics. It was just a fluke that we put in that wasteland site to say, you know, we've done our bit, would it matter? And Tony Blair bought the idea to sell to Olympics, the rest is history. So since Stratford, regeneration of communities, transformation of area became my interest. Along the lines, I have passion for commodity trading. Commodity trading. I really do. I really do. You pay me nothing. I will spend my time researching on the movement of commodities. And the reason I'm introducing myself a little bit further, because it will quietly and deeply go into what I'm going to speak next. The interest in commodity was in 1993. And that interest led me to the production of this book in 1994 called Trade Intelligence Directory. It's easier to see it. Nigeria and United Kingdom, Trade Statistics and Analysis by Harmonized Coding System, Volume 1. By 94-95, Abiola himself liked this so much that he instructed, he told Deji, his son, that they will be interested in buying the rights of me. So if you look at this copy, it actually says distribution, low price books, Ari Abiola House. They were the ones that bought this right. And before we know it, he had an idea of what he wanted to do with this. But before we knew it, his political career ended. And this never went anywhere. But it didn't stop my interest in commodities. I arranged quite a lot of commodity trades for most of our names. Because we're on camera, I wouldn't mention their names, but they are very high-profile Nigerians in the 90s, had to come through me, because what this directory basically did for me, and that's exactly why when Dele asked me to speak about this, there's a connection. What this directory did for me, for the first time, by 1993, everything about the trading in this country is owned. Her Majesty owns all the trade data. So you couldn't access any data on trade. You have to go through DTI and government systems and they manage it. It was information asymmetry. But at some point they got tired of hosting world data. So they decided to commercialize it. And nobody was interested in Africa data. Surprise, surprise. American data, other data, trading between UK and other countries, everybody wanted it. But nobody was interested in African data. And here I was going to Nigeria High Commission when I started a small trade and saying, oh, I can help you do this. And the guy that's commercial attaché said to me, oh, Tim, there is an event coming up. Africa, the Minister for Agriculture want to speak at DTI, but he hasn't got any data about agriculture. I said, oh, go to DTI. He said, no, Tim, if you know where to go, do it for us. Okay. I searched, I didn't know. Eventually, I hit into the gold mine, and I found all information about Nigeria trade with Africa. Nigeria trade with United Kingdom. So I produced this directory. And in Nigerian High Commission, sorry, I have to say this because it's important. The then commissioner for the High Commissioner was Alhaji. So you can imagine when I produced this directory and it was to be launched. A young man didn't really go deep into understanding the politics of being an Igbo. Everybody else liked this, the DTI and everybody. But the Nigerian High Commission was very reserved and they didn't want to participate in what I wanted to do as a young man to this directory. Until DTI, government-owned department, said, this is brilliant. And so when Financial Times wanted to do a nice paper called Nigeria in the year 2000, so you can imagine, when somebody was writing Nigeria in the year 2000, it was like many months to come. And they were to launch their book, Economist. The DTI wanted to speak, and they decided that we're going to launch this directory. It was on that day that Alhaji, on the conference, came straight to me and said, I want to see you in my office. Every copy you produce, we want to do business with you. So I went to his office, supplied them about 5 copies. Next time I came to the Nigerian High Commission, I was told there are no copies to be found. But the more interesting one is not that story. It's more interesting is that the British firms whose data are now made public on the day of everything I displayed. It took me 1 month to understand why they bought every single thing I published on the day and displayed. Because they didn't want anybody to get hold of the data that's in there. So anyway, that's my story. But it's interesting when Dele asked me to begin to look into this. I had to tell you this story because it's my passion and it will remain my passion. Fast forward, I have spent a lot of time, recent time, on public policy matters. And lo and behold, I find myself again in a situation where I was asked to see if I can put together a manifesto for an incoming government. Again, this story has a direct relevance to the topic I'm being asked to speak to. But this is a background. So it's not accidental that I'm speaking on this. Dele knows why he believes that I should speak on this, but that will be for him to answer. But the manifesto work was for me to put together the Nigeria 2015. And so I did a work on the future of Nigeria 2015. And that was done in 2010. So I have a right to claim that the origins of the manifesto of the 2015, up to 70% of content of it, the rationale behind it was my property. I'm not competing, I have good friends there, so they haven't done anything wrong, that's my own, but that's the background. So if that's the part of the background, the subject I'm asked to speak today is a topic that I'm sure it just simply came very fluently from Dele. He just simply said, Tim, implications of Buhari, the implication of Buhari's signing of the trade agreement. So it's just, the way he was speaking, it was so natural, and I like when people something was fluent, as they say. It might be useful to look at the implications of the trade agreement Nigeria signed, what Buhari led us into. So I said, okay. So quickly on this, may I ask this audience here right now, how many people followed that whole debate of the signing of the trade agreement with Nigeria when Nigeria signed it? Was anybody against or for it too? Is there anybody show of hands? Were you aware of the signing of the trade agreement?
We are, yes.
Yes? Okay. Okay, so if you were aware of it, were you for Nigeria signing or against Nigeria signing the African trade agreement I'm talking about?
I was mixed, and there's a reason for that. Because in terms of looking at the economics of it,
yes.
The concept of free trade is about exchange of goods and services,
yes.
right, across different borders. I don't think we have a robust enough base to actually export, because we don't actually even produce enough to fulfill our potential in the economy that we're in. So we have the largest consumer base on the continent, which provides the basis for other countries to flood our markets, because it's essentially you have a ready-made market there. But what do we have to give is the question.
Yeah, okay. I don't want you to finish the rest of my line of my presentation.
to wound you.
But it's interesting. Any other view?
That was exactly my view.
Yeah. It's okay. Right, go, young man.
Again, slightly mixed. I come from an economics background, so I understand the benefits of free trade, but I just think we're still in the relatively early stages of our economic development, and therefore I don't see that we can harness the full potential of a free trade agreement, given the fact that we have such underutilization of capacity.
Again, you have to stop there, because again, what that does is that there's about 20 pages I've got, so I can now at least know that the gist of 10 pages have been summarized by the two speakers. Okay? So yes, is there anybody? So there is one person for it and against it. Dele, you also part of against it based on the rationale. Right?
Who was for it? I don't believe anyone.
I think
will be.
from the
Carlos
young
African.
right. Okay. Well, there is nothing like being for it or against it, because the more you look at the story and understand what's behind it, then it doesn't matter whether you're for it or against it. There is an invisible hand going on, and that's the unfortunate side of it. And why do I say that? I'll come back to that in a minute, but the key points I want to leave for tonight is to say, let me read some of the headlines when Nigeria signed. So some of the headlines said, African new free trade area is promising, yet full of hurdles. That was World Economic Forum, along the lines of what the young man said. Another point says, Africa is hoping to create a free trade area that stretches across the continent. EU and its free trade agreement took decades to establish. Africa hopes it can achieve the same in a fraction of time. But Nigeria pulling out. Questions are being raised. That was BBC Africa Business Report, 21st March 2018. So you can tell straight away from there. Then some of the key message for me, as from this group, because I've got to bring it down to the context of this group, because we can speak without bringing it to this. If you don't bring it to this group, you can't translate. And the reason why I thought, how can it relate to what we're doing here? I thought, for the Fatherland Assembly, I want us to note the trend in Africa. I didn't say the trend in Nigeria. The trend in Africa. Whatever name or measure that one cares to describe what's going on in Africa, it matters to every ethnic group in Nigeria. Can I say that? So that the emphasis. What is happening in Africa and this trade agreement matters to every ethnic group in Nigeria, and I'll explain why. So the book Fatherland talks about 371.
That's correct.
So I'm saying that what is happening in the agreement matters to the 371, and that's one of the key messages. And you want to know, please, and if I miss to tell you why, I'm sure you can't wait now to ask me the questions. But and part of it for me is that if you look at what we're saying, and I'll quickly go into what is actually contained in the agreement, because somebody always said to me, I need to know what the agreement is all about. I need to know a bit of what's in there so that I'm able to contribute. So, and I'm saying, if you think of what this group is doing, one of the things that we're focused on, although I can't get the feeling from when I read our communications, I don't get the feeling that, we don't really, it doesn't matter whether we call it Nigeria or we call it various regional groups. All we want is for things to be right and for the recognition of various individual interest groups to be 100% undiluted in the discussions of every business in Nigeria. That's my general summation. I may not have the right English words to describe it. So it means that if you think of Nigeria from either 6 geopolitical zones or from the old traditional east, west, and the north, there is a correlation between those regions and this agreement Buhari signed. And I'll stop there, pause for a minute. And let me come to this agreement itself. I think the young man there was onto something when he said, and I think also you mentioned it, about the fundamentals. You cannot enter into any trade agreement without making sure that your infrastructure system is there. In fact, it is unheard of or think of that you'll be having a trade agreement without already boosting of a good infrastructure. Whatever region you look, it must be first there. In Africa, it's the other way around. No infrastructure, establishment, you can't drive or take a boat to go Africa round, can't do it from inside, can't do it sideways, can't even fly around Africa without few 23 or 24 checks. The infrastructure basic thing is not there. And yet, there is a drive to sign the agreement. And you say to yourself, what's going on? I'm not saying it's a bad thing. I actually think it's a good thing that we get ourselves organized. Those in the fintech business will tell you, it doesn't matter what the banking rules are. We will overrun it. We will do it our way. And banking will eventually change to follow us. So there is a case for Africa to sign it, irrespective of whether they have their infrastructure sorted out or not. But it's an advanced argument. So back to what this agreement is. The first reaction is that the first thing is to just simply sign an agreement. And that agreement says we have intention to be integrated. Say, wait a minute. I think it was Dele that says, can I have a copy of that agreement from a lawyer's mind? If you say an agreement, he must see the copies. Otherwise, he doesn't understand what you're saying, because it's not an agreement. And when he asked me, even this evening, the question was, yeah, it should be an agreement. It's a paper that actually says what you're signing. Oh no. It's not that there is no agreement. But the agreement is a piece of paper that is supporting the Africa 50 years plan called Agenda 2063. So if you want to know about the plan, it gets more complicated now. You have to go and read that AU have a master plan for Africa. 50 years master plan signed in 2015, outlining how Africa will be transformed. And so, if you look at that master plan, it says something like, we will be integrated. We'll do something magical. Our young people will do all that. Yeah? So you could see that when they've outlined it in their plan, how the Africa free trade was just simply an instrument to achieve the objective of 2063 agenda. You get me? 2063 agenda. So these were one of the things that are seen as an instrument to achieve the vision. Now, you then say to yourself, okay, we've better read, every community better read the agenda 2063, because let's assume that this group achieve its purpose by 2023, and 2025 latest, everybody's now listening to us. Whatever mess that there is in Nigeria, when we decide, people say, let's all agree with the Fatherland Group and move Nigeria forward. What we will do in 2025 is we will meet Africa for whatever that has been negotiated and agreed with. Doesn't matter how sophisticated and complicated and smart we are. we're going to meet the arrangements that Africa has got in 2025. So we cannot afford to just ignore it while we're doing what we're doing as Fatherland. That's the key message for me. So we must pay attention, whatever else the mess is going on in Nigeria, because that agreement have, for me, it's a constraint. It doesn't mean we're not clever, but when you have a constraint on you and say, here is the boundary, you've got to work with the constraint. This agreement, whether it's Buhari or Fatherland comes 2025, 2030 agenda, this is a constraint. But we can turn it from being a constraint to a strength if we run it parallel to what we're doing. Keep an eye on what's happening there, because the battle of the case against the West, which I prefer as a student of political science, I rather call it the global North versus the global South, which is the Chinese. The case against the West is settled. And I need to digress here for a minute. So my key message first is that this group must keep an eye on what's happening in the trade negotiations. Get hold of Agenda 2063, get to understand it, know that whatever that happens or stated there, we will inherit it. And to tell you even more so, more worrying aspect, and this is speculation now, I didn't understand why Buhari did not sign it, even though there was reasons for it, that he needed to consult the business community, and the trade union have an issue with it, that the fear of the flooding, some of the points that had already been made, the fear of the flooding of goods manufactured in other countries that will come in. So it was a legitimate excuse to say, I'm not signing. But then you say to yourself, how come quickly after 1 year, it was resolved? It was signed this June. So last year it wasn't signed, this year. And you ask yourself, what changed? Now, my conspiracy theory says that because the invisible hand behind the Africa agenda must have put enough pressure that Nigeria must be part of it, you have to sign it. We'll deliver you your elections, but you must sign it. Because I really haven't seen much that changed in terms of we're not signing and then 12 months afterwards or so we sign. I think it's worth investigation. I'm not saying that I know the answer, but it's important. But I can also tell you another reason. And the reason I know this is, I don't know how many of you who knows that Nigeria's established an agency called the Nigeria Office for Trade Negotiations. Did anybody know that? 12 months or 18 months old. It was an Igbo man, very experienced an Igbo man that ran it from WTO. He died unfortunately this September. But one of the things he's credited for was being the center that negotiated and produced the paper that gave the comfort to Buhari to say, go sign it. His name escaped me, but Nigeria have that office. It's important to check that office out. Let me read you quickly what their job is. If you see what that office job title is, they say they're responsible for developing trade reform agenda for ECOWAS, initiate, negotiate, review and conduct trade agreements, including but not limited to exploring trade relations with the US after the expiration of the Africa Group Opportunity Act, AGOA, in 2025. That's this new body. They are responsible for advancing the preliminary discussions with China and Japan. Their job is to negotiate a Nigeria-UK post-Brexit framework. Interesting one. Negotiate trade aspects of ACP countries, Africa, Caribbean, Pacific countries, and EU economic partnership agreements. continue with the ongoing negotiation of the free trade agreement with the European Free Trade Association, plan and renegotiate ECOWAS and EU. There are quite a bit of it. And the reason is that recently, it wasn't long, they informally asked me to pay attention to provide some advice and guidance, something, but to be honest, it's still, yes, sorry, you want to?
Quick question. If that office has such a remit, that means it overrides the Ministry of Industry and Trade. So how do you run that without a conflict?
Well, it is in the office of the presidency, but it's the president office. So it's like a quango of the president.
So no real power then. It's just
yeah, it's a quango of the president, but it's an important. It's not just it's an important unit. So what I think what the new remit of the unit is that the remit, their job is not so much of do everything, but to get the ministries and the parastatals to have a desk, a trade negotiation desk. So you can't go now charging out as Ministry of Trade and Industry, going overseas and start talking. You've got to speak to a staff of that unit. So that was created. So it's still very young, but I know that that's what they're trying to do. To have every ministry and every quango in Nigeria to have a desk. Because they're trying to restrict what people go out there to do on behalf of Nigeria. So that unit brings me directly to talk to yourself, to say to you, for the purposes of this conversation and the agreement, that there is actually an agency whose responsibility is to manage the trade negotiations of Nigeria. And that's where their power starts and where it ends. The challenge facing that unit, facing Nigeria, facing every African country, is the same challenge that faces this group, regardless if we ran Nigeria tomorrow. And there's the constraint I mean, and this is a very serious one. And this is where I pray and beg that while we have the debate in our group, there are certain things we just have to know as it's given. There is an invisible hand. Every state, never mind the past, the present. And this is why I want to come to this subject of the African Free Trade Agreement. Why no infrastructure platform yet forum. And when people talk about, and I've seen some of my brothers write and say, look, don't stop talking about the past. Forget the past. Let's move on. Yes, on one hand you can say they're right. But I wish that the past have left us too. I wish that the past had left us. Because if you really understand the very thing that we're celebrating that Africa has signed, it is the past that is leading it. And that's why I decided to bring these two pieces of information here. Please, whatever you do tonight, download it, it's free. It's from the OECD, the Organization for Economic and Cooperation and Development, something like that. It's a long-winded one. But let me tell you one thing about OECD. There is no institution in the world, including the World Bank, that have any data about every country in the world more than OECD. They're based in Paris. Every superpower have thought about killing them off. But when you're in trouble, you realize the only agency that will bail you out is OECD. That's why, since after the war, that institution is still here. When OECD decide that they will be the ones managing the data and producing the data that forms our trade agreement, how dare anybody say that the past is still not present? They are writing the baseline for our trade agreement. And I was at the meeting, an OECD meeting last year, 31st October in Paris, at the launch of this. I've got wonderful pictures of the characters that wrote this. And that was launched. And guess who was actually there by surprise? Obasanjo. And I was surprised. I was coming to the lift
lift and we saw me and we talked. We have a common individual that we talk about. He just say, oh, drag me and we were walking upstairs. I decided to take a few camera shots, videoing myself walking with him. What he said at the conference was interesting. Obasanjo's interest is not about necessarily, and this is again, be careful on how it, but this is my view. His interest when he was asked to speak and finish the conference event, his interest wasn't so much of whether we will sign agreement or not, become next stage be custom union or not, third stage become common market or not. He actually wants us to be in the fourth stage, currency union, and possibly a political union. That was his closing remark. And his example at the conference was, listen, if I'm going, and there must be some merit to what he said, let's not write him off. He says, if I'm going to 23 African countries, I carry 23 currencies to buy in 23 African countries. I don't want to do that. I want to have one currency. You said to yourself, how do you get one currency? You've got to be integrated. You've got to have a common custom union so that the tariff, you allow your gates to be open among each other, and then you also have a common tariff with the rest of the world. That's stage 2 of any serious, and then you have a common market before you think of currency. And once you think of currency, the only thing left is now United States of Africa. Obasanjo is in the 4th stage. That's what he's saying to them. 4th stage, that's where we should be. Are you guys getting me? So when we talk about the invisible hand, it is life and kicking. You cannot, I repeat, and you can quote me, you never find any detail of the revenue of every single government in Africa, how they're making their money, and how they should make their money in detail, verbatim of what they're doing, other than this document. That's the first one that was released. Because OECD issue was, for us to help Africa, we need to, you can open all your books, all of you, and let's see how you are making money. Are you collecting enough tax? Are you doing this? We can then use your income to bankroll you. So if you say, give me money to run a rail line from the Cape Town to Cairo, we'll look at your revenue collection. So this is actually the first time detailed revenue collection of what's happening. And let me tell you, half of what African countries are doing, the data is already collected by the West anyway, because they give them loan, they give you all that, so they have the data. All they're saying is that the other one you're not telling us, we can help you collect it, we've got the other half. Okay, so that's what this is all about. So it was interesting that it was called 18 Africa Forum of the OECD. That was when it was launched. The other point, and I've got to sort of try and wrap up now, because like Dele said, if you get me going, you can't stop me, right? But the reason why I thought to talk about this second one, go.
Are you going to pass it around?
Yeah, I will, yeah. No, I won't pass it around because it will distract you. The reason this one, so they produce the revenue one, which is important. You can't do any serious business without people seeing your cash flow. This one is called the Africa Development Dynamics. So in that 2063 agenda, OECD was responsible for helping African governments to now begin to look at data on how they will solve some of their problems. Growth, jobs, and inequality. And the best information, what I like about this book, if you download it, by the way, they've got the second version, 19 one, which they've just done in November. What I like about this is that if I have time, I will speak to you. The whole book is summarized in this flyer. And the way it's done it, I'll just tell you, 10 recommendations for a prosperous Africa. This is OECD. By the way, this is OECD weren't doing it for Africa. It was commissioned by African Union for OECD to do it for them. So the authority itself is commissioning OECD and say, please, you know it all, do it for us. So no wonder Rwanda was quite, Paul Kagame was quite keen to launch this. Think of it.
You don't have to be. There are two types of African countries that exist. And I've got to, this is my last major point I have to make. There are two types of African countries we have. Those who have no intention of ever having an infrastructure development in their country and industrialize. There are actually some African countries, however, some of them are small. Their presidents just have no intention. So, the idea that you have economic flow, free flow of goods moving around when somebody doesn't want to do any infrastructure development is a very cynical concept. There's another group that, like Nigeria, will say, we need to have infrastructure. If we're going to be serious on this, we're going to build the roads, we're going to do everything so that we can take advantage. Otherwise, your fear will emerge. You don't have infrastructure, people will dump on us, we can't move things fast. So there are countries who believe, I've got to the infrastructure to take advantage of it. If you don't have it, you're not going to have advantage. And the others who believe, what's infrastructure? Why do I want to bother? All you need to do, if you're a Western company, I have now the ticket for it to enter Nigeria as you wish. Just dump, come and build in my location. Don't worry, do whatever you like. Here is my ticket. Off you go. Go flood Nigeria. So you will never ever get our brothers and sisters, countries. There's some of them that will not. So when you then begin to know the disparity, and the final technical point I have to say here, 33 countries of the poorest countries in the world is within sub-Sahara. Within 33 of the poorest countries in the world, what they classified as least developed countries, it's in sub-Sahara. Sub-Sahara is 55. So 33 is the poorest. No intention of infrastructure development, and you land them with free access and trade. Who is deceiving who? Who is deceiving who? Listen, I can go on this, but I think this is the time to begin to close down, to say a few things. That there is a case against the West on this signature that Buhari signed. There is also a case against the South, the Chinese. And those two cases, we must spend time to understand the case against the Chinese. Because we spend too much time, even in our group, on the case against the West. There is a case against the Chinese. But also there's some strength about them. The case against China is the most important one. Is that Africa have 12 countries that are very rich in mineral resources, that control 90% of mineral resources in Africa. Look at the footprint of Chinese. It is those 12 that they do the 100% investment on. So what's this thing about Africa? 55 countries. And somebody says, you know what? If you don't have any bargaining chip, I ain't coming to your country. There's a case against it. There's a question for them to answer. They do not go where there is no natural resources as a bargaining chip. They're saying, okay, the West have cheated you enough. We'll do a trade by barter. We'll do your infrastructure. You give us your oil free. Fine. So there is a case against them. But it doesn't mean that we can't get good negotiations out of China. Because there are countries that have put their first 11 before China, and believe me, they've got more than anybody could have got out of China. Dele was the first person who kept telling me years ago, Nigeria is about time Nigeria put out their first 11. If we have first 11, we will not fear China. We will not fear the West. But the secret of everything you do, and I'll end on that note, is on data. Data is the king. Data is the king. Just an anecdote, I was in Chatham House recently at a conference, and some people, they were talking about South Africa, why South Africa is totally gone, hopeless, it ain't going to survive, it's done, that's it. And after these people spoke at the audience, I sat down there thinking, no way, it can't be right. What all things you hear about Africa is based on opinion. 10% data and 90% opinion. When I have this data in my hand, I went to the guys, they published a book and they were marketing. I said to him, you know what? I sat down there, these are big guys, I can't mention their name because Chatham House rule says you can't say the names of people. So For that reason, I'm not saying their names, but these are very powerful people. And after speaking, I'm sitting down there, sitting with this data, knowing fully well I'm interested in data. And somebody's telling me about South Africa without much data. I came after the conference, they saw the book, I said, I'm not buying that book. I'm not buying it because that is just as woeful as what he's just told us. Walked away, I came back. No, the conscience says to me, no, you got to buy this book. You got to buy it because you know that it's not database opinion. Buy it. But before you buy it, go to the author and say, you know what, why I'm buying this book? It's because I will never see anybody that's so pessimistic about South Africa greater than you. And I went to her and said, please sign this book, I'm buying it because I know if I defeat you, I've defeated the worst pessimist about South Africa. And he looked at me. He didn't find it funny. I said, because I know that you've given me 90% of your opinion, 10% facts. I said, go to OECD. I use their now agent. Go to OECD and see all the data about Africa. I said, I wish you spoke with the data on Africa, and you can see that that data tells you a different picture of South Africa or African countries. I said, for that reason, I'm buying your book. So he signed it, and he turned around and said, oh, by the way, read the history side. There's a history I wrote, but I didn't write it down. So I said, don't worry about that. So on that note, I've got to love you guys and leave you. I've got so many to say, but I've got to stop because that man is going to stop.
That is possibly the most awesome speech that we've had so far in this club.
Can I qualify? Can I qualify, please?
You're not allowed to.
Okay,
It's my turn to speak.
Thank you.
Because whenever people of finance, we know we lawyers are orators, but whenever people of finance stand up here, we always worry that we're going to get a very boring delivery. But that was packed with everything. Content, presentation, passion, information. It was fully loaded. It was a fantastic delivery. Guys, that is a foretaste for May. Because Tim is speaking in May. And I had to keep him on a leash this evening, but you could see this is a racehorse that's rearing to go and saying, look, you know, let me run, let me fly. And it really does go to show what we're trying to do. The thoughts, as I was sitting there, my mind went across, you know, the alleged moon landing. The alleged moon landing. One small step for man and a giant step for mankind. This group, small as we are, of course we're bigger than this. These are the physical ones who come and are opportune to come. But you know we have members across the world. And on our WhatsApp group, we have close to 100. So never underestimate what can be achieved, the change that can be achieved when a small group of individuals come together and decide to make change happen. When people speak of the founding fathers of the United States of America, our philosopher here, Dele, will tell us that there were only, how many of them were there, the founding father? I think there were 4 of them, 5 at the most. It just takes mental resolution, and then the 5 become the 10 become the 20, and the multiply effect applies and pushes us forward. So please never underestimate what this group is capable of achieving and what it is determined to achieve. And Tim touched on it. What is our agenda? Our agenda is very simple. We know that the jokers in power there at present are not our first 11. Hell no, they're not. And our object is to change the game such that the first 11, which we know we have, will come through. And when our first 11 faces their first 11, we don't care who is put before us. We know that we will hold our own.
Yeah.
It's just a question of getting that first 11 there. And the conference is a key first step for us towards putting that, making that thing happen. What I took from Tim's presentation, the deepest points, which really encapsulates much of what he said. The past is still with us. Those ones who say it all happened in the past, forget the past. Let's face forward. That's why our conference is titled Looking Back, Facing Forward. Because it was Winston Churchill who said, the further back you look, the further ahead you can see. Because there's nothing new in this world of ours. Nothing new. New labels, new language, new tags, but the substance remains the same. What's the origin of this free trade that they're now talking about? It started in the wake of abolition of the slave trade. I think I touched on it in Fatherless. Slave trade became free trade. They knew that now they couldn't carry on taking the slaves, the people out. But these people think ahead, which is what Fatherland aims to do. We're the think tank for our people, thinking ahead. They sat down and thought ahead. So, okay, this game can't continue. What are we going to replace it with? Those guys in Africa, there's resources there. We're not taking the people out any longer. We're going to take the resources out. So how are you going to get the resources out? Free trade. Open doors, let it out. And our manufacturers, what we manufacture with those resources. Let there be no obstacles, boundaries towards, in front of those goods coming in. Leave your doors open. Free trade. So the past is very much still with us. It's the same language we're talking now, as Tim brought out very beautifully. Same game. Leave your doors open. Open access. But are we, with those jokers in power, positioned to play on the basis of leave your doors open? This is the issue. We heard how the OECD has all our statistics. Now, I'm glad there are a lot of accountants in this room because I have a grudge against accountants.
Who doesn't?
And let me explain why. They tend to be the most successful entrepreneurs. They do. And you know why, lawyers? You know why they are so successful as entrepreneurs, these accountants? Because they are looking at the books of existing businesses, day in, day out. They can see the margins and the returns on this particular activity and that particular activity. And from there they say, these returns are fantastic in this area. Let's open a side business in there. Not so? Accountants, am I slandering you?
No.
Shimon is not responding.
He'll come, you know him. He'll come.
He said you're right.
He will never remain silent. He will bring it up. So OECD have free access to our books. Where is the revenue flows coming from, etc., etc., etc. Free trade. We're open. We are open. 24 hours. You know those shops that never close? 24/7, 7-Eleven. That's what we are. This is what I picked up from what Tim was saying. So, are you directing the question at my presentation, or are you going to wait? Tim is going to take questions.
Yeah.
Tim is going to take questions. I'm just allowing him to have a little mouthful, even though we're not going to allow you to finish the whole meal because people are itching for comments and contributions. But in essence, just to close off my own, that is a fantastic snippet. I really now have, when you look at the African Union Charter, do you know this is Berlin conference all over again? It's the European powers that have gathered together again, defining and setting our agenda. So it used to be called Organization for African Unity, and then the name was changed to African Union. Does it sound like European Union? Does monetary union sounds like something we're hearing over here? And in the context of Brexit, where you have a country like Britain running away from monetary union with fellow Europeans who are mature economies, saying, hell no, we're not going there. And they're running away from political union. Hell no, we're not going there. And our African peoples, and many of our leaders, there's one woman whose video keeps being circulated, I forget her name, and everybody gets very excited. She's a brilliant orator, I agree, brilliant orator. But do we really understand what we are holding? Because when these people come to sell things to you, it's not the Oyibo man who's going to come and tell you, hey guys, you need to be in political union. You need to have the United States of Africa. It's one of us that they're going to say. Sweet talkers, eloquent, orators. And we are not seeing the game. Because we look at this crisis we have already. Political union of 371. And now you want political union of the whole of Africa. So all the gates will be open. Herdsmen will roam wherever they want to roam. Anyway, let me not get on to another issue. Tim, you're ready to take questions?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.